Mr. Bongino, you occupy the seat of FBI Deputy Director, yet your history demonstrates that you have turned law enforcement into a weapon against immigrants and Muslims. Ilhan Omar's voice echoed through the hearing chamber, piercing and accusatory, utilizing that recognizable tone she adopts whenever the cameras are recording. She stood positioned at her microphone, her designer hijab arranged flawlessly, her facial expression one of righteous indignation. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the hearing she had personally demanded, the stage she intended to utilize to dismantle Dan Bongino on national television. Tonight, she went on, becoming more animated with her topic, I intend to reveal your prejudice, your corruption, and your discriminatory agenda for the whole world to witness. The progressive wing of the audience burst into cheers, having arrived early to pack the room, eager to see their squad champion defeat Trump's FBI appointee. C-SPAN cameras recorded every single second, with CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News all present, marking this as the hearing everyone had been anticipating. The Congressional Oversight Committee on Immigration System Integrity was the formal name, but every person understood what this event truly represented. It was a show trial featuring Ilhan Omar versus Dan Bongino, pitting the squad's ascending star against Trump's polarizing FBI deputy director. She had dedicated weeks to preparation, her staff having gathered opposition research, practiced her verbal assaults, and synchronized with sympathetic media outlets. She was prepared, while Dan Bongino sat at the witness table, 50 years of age, a former NYPD officer and former Secret Service agent, a Queens native through and through. He was dressed in a dark suit with a white shirt and red tie, the classic federal agent appearance, but his face revealed something Omar had not foreseen. He was not anxious, he was not defensive, and he was nearly smiling, showing that subtle quirk at the corner of his mouth that a cop displays when a suspect is about to say something incredibly foolish. The American public deserves to be informed, Omar pressed forward, that you have utilized your office to target at-risk communities, to badger refugees, and to execute Trump's discriminatory immigration protocols. You pretend to be concerned with law and order, yet your actual objective is discrimination against individuals who share my appearance. More cheering followed, accompanied by camera flashes suggesting she was succeeding, or at least that was her impression. Bongino leaned closer to his microphone, and when he spoke, that Queen's accent was distinct, projecting working-class New York street cop energy rather than the refined D.C. rhetoric everyone anticipated. Congresswoman, he stated, his voice steady but projecting authority, before we discuss my history, let us discuss your history. Let us discuss immigration fraud. Let us discuss marriage fraud. Let us discuss perjury. Let us discuss tax fraud. And let us discuss campaign finance violations. He waited a moment, allowing the words to register, because I have been a police officer for 20 years, 4 years with the NYPD, and 12 years with the Secret Service. I have investigated fraud incidents. I have arrested criminals, and I recognize fraud when I observe it. Another pause followed, and the room had fallen silent, while Omar's smile had become fixed. And you, Congresswoman, Bongino leaned forward with his eyes fixed on hers. You are committing numerous federal crimes, and we are going to discuss every single one of them right here and right now on national television. He retrieved a thick folder, arranged with tabs and visible documents, stating you wished to discuss immigration system integrity, which is perfect. Let us begin with how you deceived the immigration system by entering into marriage with your own brother. The room erupted in noise, while Omar's expression transformed from righteous confidence to paralyzed shock in a fraction of a second. Her staff members were frantically glancing at one another, and her attorneys were leaning in. Realizing this was not the script and not how this event was intended to proceed. "You wish to discuss immigration system integrity," Bongino repeated, settling back into his chair with his cop mode fully engaged. "Good. Let us discuss your marriage to Ahmed Noor Saeed Elmi, a British citizen who, according to significant evidence, is your biological sibling." He opened the folder and removed the first collection of documents, stating, "Now I have worked fraud cases, Secret Service financial crimes, identity theft, and marriage fraud. I have witnessed everything, and this specific case," he shook his head, "is a textbook example. Allow me to explain how I know you married your brother to perpetrate immigration fraud." Omar attempted to interject, claiming these are repulsive racist conspiracy documents. "They are not racist, Congresswoman." Bongino's voice was unyielding, not angry but simply factual in a cop tone, because evidence is not racist and facts are not racist. "So let us examine the facts," he said, holding up the initial document, showing that in 2009 you legally married Ahmed Noor Saeed Elmi. That fact is not debated, as you admitted it, with a marriage certificate filed in Hennepin County, Minnesota, in August 2009. "You were roughly 26 or 27 years old," he continued without waiting for a response, "and now this is where the situation becomes intriguing. Regarding Ahmed Noor Saeed Elmi, let us discuss his identity, as I retrieved his educational records from the United Kingdom. He attended secondary school there prior to arriving in the United States, and Bongino held up official-looking papers bearing British government seals. UK school records list his father's name as Noor Saeed Elmi, which is his father. Now let us examine your refugee application papers from 1995 when your family arrived in America." He displayed another document and placed them side by side, noting the father's name is Noor Saeed Elmi. The same name, the exact same name, and the same spelling. He looked at the committee, at the cameras, and at Omar, stating, "Now I am just a cop from Queens, and I do not possess fancy degrees in mathematics. However, where I originate, when two people list the identical man as their father, that makes them siblings. Specifically, brother and sister. Family." Someone in the audience gasped, and camera shutters snapped rapidly. "Yet that is merely one piece of evidence," Bongino continued, his voice steady as he built the case piece by piece. "Let me provide you with more, specifically from social media and Instagram." He produced printouts and held them aloft, showing Ahmed Elmi's Instagram account before you deleted everything and before you attempted to scrub the internet. But you know what they say, that the internet is eternal, and these are archived posts. He began reading a post from 2013 where Ahmed Elmi posts a photograph with your daughter from your previous relationship with Ahmed Hirsi. In the caption, he refers to her as his niece, not his stepdaughter, but his niece. Bongino looked up, stating now, if he was simply your husband, she would be his stepdaughter, correct? Because that is how marriage functions. However, he calls her his niece, which is an interesting choice of words, because that is what she would be if he was your brother and not your husband. Your brother? Omar was shaking her head, though she was not speaking, while her lawyers were whispering with urgency. But wait, Bongino said, getting warmed up. Now, there is more, so let me tell you about an email retrieved through a Freedom of Information Act request from Ahmed Elmi to you. In 2011, do you want to hear what it says? He asked as he pulled out the email and read it slowly and clearly. Quote, "Thanks for helping me get papers, sister. I will make sure to pay you back when I get to London." End quote. Silence. Absolute dead silence followed. Sister, Bongino repeated the word, letting it hang in the air, not wife, but sister. He referred to you as sister in an email regarding helping him obtain papers, specifically immigration papers. That is what this entire situation was about, that you married your brother to assist him in obtaining U.S. citizenship, or at minimum student visa status, in-state tuition benefits, and an easier path to permanent residence. He was not finished, adding, "But that is still not all the evidence I possess. I have 6 affidavits, which are sworn statements under penalty of perjury, from members of the Minneapolis Somali community. These are people who knew your family and people who knew you in Somalia before you fled." "Do you know what they all state?" he asked as he held up the stack of documents. "They all state that Ahmed Nur Saeed Elmi is your brother, all 6 independently and under oath identifying him as your sibling. One of them, Mrs. Fedumo Hassan, knew your family before the Civil War and is very specific and very detailed. She states, Ahmed Elmi is your biological brother, leaving no doubt and no confusion." Bongino organized his papers and looked directly at Omar, saying, "Now let us discuss the timeline, because this is where the fraud becomes crystal clear. In 2002, you have an Islamic marriage ceremony with Ahmed Hirsi, which is not legal, just religious, and you have 2 children with him in 2006 and 2008. 2 children, he counted on his fingers. Then, in 2008, you separate from Hirsi, a religious divorce and not legal since you were never legally married. In 2009, immediately, you legally marry Ahmed Elmi, the man with the same father as you, meaning your brother. But here is the truly interesting part, that from 2009 to 2011, you, Ahmed Hirsi, and Ahmed Elmi all lived at the same address. All 3 of you were in a Columbia Heights, Minnesota apartment building in the same unit. He pulled out lease documents, utility bills, and voter registration records showing all 3 names at the same address. You were residing with your children's father and your legal husband, who just happens to be your brother, at the same time, under the same roof. Someone in the audience said, "What?" loud enough to be heard. In 2009, immediately after marrying you, Ahmed Elmi enrolled at North Dakota State University, your alma mater. Do you know what marriage to a U.S. citizen obtains for you? It gets in-state tuition, which is significantly cheaper than out-of-state or international rates. It also makes you eligible for U.S. student aid programs, and also gives you legal status to remain in the country. Bongino leaned forward, stating he graduated in 2012, then moved to Minneapolis, then got evicted from public housing, then went back to the UK where he is right now. Mission accomplished, he got his degree, got his benefits, and it was game over. He pulled out one final document, saying, "And here is the smoking gun, your divorce filing from 2017. You signed it under penalty of perjury, which means lying on it is a felony. In that filing you claimed, and I quote, 'I have had no contact with Ahmed Nur Saeed Elmi since June 2011. He placed that document down and pulled out photographs from London in 2015, 4 years after you claimed you had no contact. These are archived Instagram photos showing you and Ahmed Elmi together in London. Clearly you, clearly him, and clearly together.'" He looked at Omar, stating that is perjury, Congresswoman. You lied under oath in a court document, which is a felony separate from the marriage fraud and separate from the immigration fraud. That acts as its own federal crime. And Omar found her voice to be shaky and defensive. "This is all taken out of context," she claimed, saying, "These are debunked conspiracy theories from racist bloggers." "Debunked!" Bongino's voice went sharp. "Congresswoman, nothing I just presented has been debunked. UK government documents showing the father's name are not debunked. Your refugee application showing the same father's name is not debunked. And the email calling you sister is not debunked. 6 sworn affidavits are not debunked. And photos contradicting your sworn statement are not debunked. He paused, asking, "Do you know what would debunk all of this? Just one simple thing. A DNA test." The room grew tense, for if Ahmed Elmi is not your brother, a DNA test proves it. Simple, easy, 1 hour, swab your cheek, swab his cheek, and the lab results come back, not related. Story over, you are vindicated, and everyone who accused you looks like a fool. He spread his hands, noting the Daily Mail requested you take a DNA test in 2019 and you refused. Multiple other outlets requested it and you refused. Members of Congress requested it and you refused. And he leaned back to ask why. I will tell you why, because you know what that test would reveal. You know Ahmed Elmi is your brother, and you cannot risk that test because it would prove beyond any doubt that you committed federal immigration fraud. Omar was shaking her head with tears forming, saying, "I will not dignify these racist attacks." Racist? Bongino's voice went cold with a street cop edge coming through. Let me tell you something, Congresswoman. I worked the 75th Precinct in East New York, Brooklyn. Do you know what that is? It is one of the most dangerous neighborhoods in New York City. I dealt with every ethnicity, every religion, and every background, arresting people of every color and every creed. You know what I cared about: evidence, crime, and fraud. He pointed at his documents, saying, "This is not about your race. This is not about your religion. And this is not about you being an immigrant. This is about federal crimes, multiple federal crimes, as immigration fraud is a federal crime punishable by up to 5 years in prison. It carries up to a $250,000 fine, and for immigrants who commit immigration fraud, deportation." He let that sink in, saying, "You came to this country as a refugee. This country saved your life, saved your family, gave you opportunities, citizenship, and eventually a seat in Congress. And you repaid it by defrauding the immigration system, by gaming it, and by marrying your brother to help him get benefits he was not entitled to receive." His voice rose slightly, saying, "You know what that does. It makes every legitimate refugee suspect. It makes people doubt the system. And it makes Americans who are already skeptical about immigration say, 'See, they commit fraud.' You hurt every honest refugee and every honest immigrant because you could not follow the rules." He closed that section of his folder, stating marriage fraud, immigration fraud, and perjury. That is 3 federal felonies right there. And we are just getting started, because we have not even talked about your taxes yet. Omar sat frozen. Her attorneys were writing frantically, and her staffers were on their phones. The progressive section of the gallery had gone completely silent, with no more applause and no more chanting. Just shock. Bongino pulled out a new section from his folder, saying, "Let us talk about your tax returns, Congresswoman. You know what I learned working financial fraud cases in the Secret Service." Bongino began organizing his next batch of documents. "Follow the money. Always follow the money, because money does not lie. People lie, but bank records, tax returns, and financial documents tell the truth." He held up a new set of papers indicating 2014 and 2015, your federal tax returns filed jointly. Do you know what married filing jointly means, Congresswoman? It means you are filing taxes as a married couple with your spouse, your legal husband or wife. He set down the returns with Omar's signature, visible even from a distance. In 2014, you filed joint tax returns with Ahmed Abdessalam Hirsi, the father of your children, the man you had a religious ceremony with back in 2002. In 2015, it was the same thing. Joint returns with Ahmed Hirsi. Bongino looked up at her, stating problem. Big problem. You were legally married to Ahmed Elmi, not Ahmed Hirsi. Elmi is your brother, and the marriage was still valid because you did not legally divorce him until 2017. He pulled out the marriage certificate and the divorce filing date, placing them side by side. So, in 2014 and 2015, you filed joint tax returns with a man you were not legally married to while being legally married to a different man entirely. That is tax fraud, Congresswoman. And he read from a legal document, Title 26, United States Code Section 7206. Making false statements on tax returns, specifically subsection 1. Quote, any person who willfully makes and subscribes any return statement or other document which contains or is verified by a written declaration that it is made under the penalties of perjury, and which he does not believe to be true and correct, as to every material matter shall be guilty of a felony. End quote. He set it down, noting a penalty up to 3 years in prison, up to $100,000 in fines, plus the taxes owed, plus penalties, plus interest. Omar tried to respond, claiming I corrected those filings. When you got caught, Bongino finished for her. You corrected them after the Minnesota Campaign Finance and Public Disclosure Board started investigating you. After journalists started asking questions, after the story became public. Not before, but after. He leaned forward, stating that correcting fraud after you are caught does not make it not fraud. It just makes it admitted fraud. You signed those tax returns under penalty of perjury. Look at your signature right there. You certified that everything on those returns was true and correct. He pointed at the documents. But it was not true. You claimed to be married to Ahmed Hirsi, but you were not. You were married to Ahmed Elmi. That is material information. That is not a small mistake. That is not a technicality. That is fraud. But maybe, Bongino continued with his voice taking on a sarcastic edge, maybe you just forgot you were married to your brother. Maybe it slipped your mind. So let us talk about something where you definitely did not forget. Let us talk about perjury, he said, pulling out a court document with the official seal visible. August 2nd, 2017, divorce filing in Hennepin County District Court. You petitioning to divorce Ahmed Noor Saeed Elmi, your brother, your husband. Wait, which is it? He flipped through the pages, saying in this filing, you make several statements under oath, under penalty of perjury. Do you know what perjury is, Congresswoman? It is lying under oath. It is a felony, a federal crime, a state crime, and a serious crime. He found the relevant section, page 3, application for service by alternate means. This is where you claim you cannot find Ahmed Elmi to serve him divorce papers. You state, and again, this is under penalty of perjury, quote, I have had no contact with Ahmed Noor Saeed Elmi since June 2011, end quote. He set the document down carefully, saying June 2011. That is what you swore under oath in a legal filing with your signature right there, right above the line that says, I declare, under penalty of perjury, that everything I have stated in this document is true and correct. He paused to let the tension build, saying, now I have been a cop for 20 years. I have testified in court more times than I can count, so I know what perjury means. It means if you lie on that document, you go to prison. That is why people take it seriously. That is why you think twice before you sign it, he said, pulling out a manila envelope and opening it slowly and dramatically. June 2015, London, England. Instagram posts, archived screenshots, timestamps, geotagged, the whole 9 yards. He laid out the photos showing you and Ahmed Elmi together in London. Clear photos, your face, his face, together 4 years after you claimed you had no contact with him. He pointed at the images, asking, "That is you, right? Designer hijab. Distinctive features? That is you and that is Ahmed Elmi, the same person from all the other photos we have. The same person from the marriage certificate photo. It is him." Bongino looked at Omar, whose face had gone pale, saying, "So let me get this straight. In June 2011, you supposedly stopped all contact with your brother husband. But in 2015, you are photographed with him in London. Then, in 2017, you file legal documents claiming you had not seen him since 2011. He tapped the documents, stating that is perjury. Clear, simple, undeniable perjury, as you lied under oath in a court filing about material facts. That is a felony, a state felony, and probably federal too, depending on circumstances. Omar's voice came out desperate, saying the photos do not prove. "Do not prove what?" Bongino interrupted. "Do not prove you were together. They do. Do not prove you had contact. They do. Do not prove you lied in your divorce filing. They do." He organized his papers, saying, "Let me tell you something I learned in investigations. When somebody lies about one thing, you start doubting everything they say. When somebody commits one crime, you start looking for others. And Congresswoman, you have a pattern here." He counted on his fingers, saying marriage fraud check, immigration fraud check, tax fraud check, perjury check. That is 4 federal felonies, 4 separate crimes, all documented, all provable. His voice went quieter and more intense, stating, "I protected presidents for 12 years. George W. Bush, Barack Obama, 2 presidents I did not vote for, but I protected them because that was my job. I followed the rules, every background check, every security clearance, every protocol by the book." He pointed at her, saying, "You are in Congress, you make laws, and you are supposed to follow them. But you do not. You commit crimes, and then call anyone who investigates you a racist. Well, I have news for you. I am a cop, and I investigate crimes because that is what cops do. When the evidence is this strong, we make arrests." He leaned back, adding, "Now I cannot arrest you. I am not that kind of law enforcement anymore, but the evidence is public. It is documented, and it is on the record. Everyone watching this knows exactly what you did." And Omar was crying now with mascara running and her voice breaking. "This is a witch hunt. You are persecuting me because you broke the law." Bongino finished, not yelling, not angry, just stating facts about multiple laws, multiple times, and multiple felonies. He pulled out his next section, saying and speaking of breaking the law, "Let us talk about your campaign finances. Let us talk about Tim Minot. And let us talk about how you used campaign funds to pay for your affair." Bongino retrieved a thick stack of documents including Federal Election Commission filings, campaign finance reports, and financial records. This section was heavy with evidence as he began speaking about Tim Minot, a political consultant and married man who ran a firm called E Street Group. "Do you know how I know all this? Because it is public record, and FEC filings are public so everyone can see them." He spread out the filings, showing that in 2018 your campaign starts paying E Street Group. For what? Consulting services, digital consulting, and travel expenses. "Do you know how much?" he asked, as he pulled out an actual physical calculator and held it up. "Let us add it up. 2018 was approximately $190,000, and 2019 was approximately $180,000. The total through 2019 was $370,000 to one consulting firm, Tim Meinetz's firm. He set the calculator down, saying, "Now, I am not saying consulting is inherently wrong, as campaigns hire consultants, and that is normal. But here is what is not normal: having an affair with your consultant while paying him massive amounts of campaign money." Omar tried to interrupt, saying my personal relationships. "But stop," Bongino said sharply. "Stop right there. This is not personal when campaign funds are involved and when donor money is involved. When federal election law is involved, then it is very much public business." He pulled out a court document regarding Beth Meinetz, Tim Meinetz's wife, who filed for divorce in April 2019. Do you know what she said in her divorce filing? Let me read directly from the court documents. He found the relevant section, quote, "My husband Tim Meinetz told me in April 2019 that he was having an affair with Ilhan Omar. He informed me that he was in love with the congresswoman and that he wanted to dissolve our marriage." End quote. Bongino looked up, noting that is under oath in a legal filing, Beth Meinetz swearing that her husband confessed to having an affair with you, while you were both married to other people, and while his firm was receiving hundreds of thousands of dollars from your campaign. He pulled out more documents, adding, "But it gets better." Beth Meinetz gave a deposition, which is sworn testimony, and in that deposition she describes conversations with her husband about the affair. She says something very interesting, and he found the quote where she testified that Tim told her, quote, "Do not worry about money. Ilhan's campaign is covering everything." End quote. The room went completely silent, and that statement hung in the air like a bomb. "Ilhan's campaign is covering everything," Bongino repeated slowly, meaning campaign funds, donor money, and money from working people who believed in you. People who donated to elect you and who thought their money would go toward campaign activities. He pulled out specific FEC filings, saying, "Let us look at some of these expenses." March 2019 shows travel expenses for E Street Group, $15,000 for a trip to California. A campaign event, maybe, or maybe a romantic getaway, he said as he flipped pages. April 2019, the same month Beth Meinetz says the affair was admitted, shows more travel expenses and more consulting fees. May 2019, June 2019, July 2019, every single month shows huge payments. He pulled out credit card records showing campaign credit card statements for dinners, hotels, and flights all charged to the campaign. All while you were having an affair, and all while both of you were married to other people. Bongino's voice went harder, asking, "You know what is particularly disgusting about this? Beth Meinetz was not just your consultant's wife. She worked in politics too. She had a career and she had a life. You destroyed her marriage, you broke up a family, and you used campaign funds to do it." Omar was shaking her head with tears streaming, claiming, "This is unfair. This is unfair." Bongino's Queen's accent got thicker with the street cop coming out, saying, "You want to talk about unfair. Let me tell you what is unfair. Working people donating $20, $50, $100 because they believe in you, because they think you are fighting for them, and you take that money and use it to fund your affair." He slammed the documents down, not violent, just emphatic, saying that is unfair, that is theft, that is fraud, and that is a violation of federal campaign finance law. He pulled out another section, saying, "But wait, there is more." March 2020. You marry Tim Meinetz. The affair is public now, and everyone knows. Beth Meinetz's divorce is finalized. You divorce Ahmed Hirsi, and you marry Tim. He pulled out post-2021 FEC filings, asking, "Do you think the payments stopped or think you stopped funneling money to your now husband?" No, they increased, and he started reading amounts showing 2020 was $1.1 million, more than triple the previous years combined. In 2021, another million plus. So you are now paying your husband's consulting firm massive amounts of campaign money. Bongino looked at the committee and at the cameras, saying, "Think about this. You marry the guy, he is now your husband, and you continue paying his company. Your campaign donors are now funding your household and your family income. That is a textbook conflict of interest. That is potentially illegal coordination between candidate and consultant, and that is laundering campaign funds into personal income." He pulled out FEC regulations and read them aloud, stating federal election law prohibits using campaign funds for personal use. Personal use includes payments to family members beyond fair market value. It includes payments that primarily benefit the candidate personally rather than the campaign. He set the regulations down, asking, "You are paying your husband over $1 million a year for consulting. Does that seem like fair market value, or does that seem like you are using campaign money to support your household?" Omar tried again, saying the FEC reviewed and the FEC is investigating. Bongino corrected her, stating multiple ethics complaints have been filed and the investigation is ongoing. "Everyone watching this can see what you did," his voice going quiet and intense. "I have seen corruption in my 20 years. I have seen politicians take bribes, and I have seen lobbyists buy access. I have seen all kinds of financial crimes, but this is cruder than most of it." He gestured at the pile of documents, saying you had an affair, used campaign money to fund it, destroyed a marriage, then married the guy and kept funneling donor money to him. That is not consulting. That is not legitimate business. That is personal enrichment, and that is fraud. He leaned forward one final time, saying, and the worst part is, you did all this while claiming to fight for working people, while claiming to represent the struggling, the poor, and the vulnerable. They donated to you, and you used their money to fund your affair and then support your wealthy husband. He closed that section of his folder, listing marriage fraud, tax fraud, perjury, and campaign finance fraud. How many felonies is that? I have lost count, but we are not done. Because there is something even more fundamental we need to discuss, he said, pulling out his next section. Let us talk about what you did to the refugee system that saved your life. Bongino's tone shifted, becoming less cop and more personal, as this was emotional for him. You came to this country as a refugee, he began with his voice softer now. In 1995, you were 12 or 13 years old, and your family fled Somalia due to civil war, a terrible situation. You spent 4 years in a refugee camp in Kenya, the Dadaab refugee camp. I have seen photos and I have read about it, describing horrific conditions. He pulled out documents, stating then America accepted you and your family with refugee status. You came to Minnesota, got settled, got help, got opportunities, learned English, went to school at North Dakota State University, and got your degree. He looked at Omar, saying in 2000, at age 17 or 18, you became a United States citizen. Naturalized, full citizen, with all rights and all privileges, as this country welcomed you, protected you, and gave you everything. He paused, adding, and 19 years later, you are in Congress, going from refugee to Congresswoman. That is the American dream, right? That is proof the system works. It is proof that America welcomes people who need help, and proof that opportunity exists here. His voice hardened. But you did not just benefit from the system. You exploited it. You defrauded it. And you betrayed it. He pulled out the marriage fraud evidence again, saying you married your brother to gain immigration access, to get him benefits, and to help him circumvent the system, the very same system that saved your life. You turned around and defrauded it. Bongino stood up and walked a few steps in street cop lecture mode. You know what that does. You know what happens when a refugee commits immigration fraud. It makes every refugee suspect. Every legitimate asylum seeker gets questioned harder, gets investigated more thoroughly, and gets their claims doubted. He pointed at her, saying, you proved the skeptics right. Everyone who says refugees commit fraud, you proved them right. Everyone who says we need stricter vetting, you proved them right. Everyone who says immigrants game the system, you proved them right. His voice rose, saying, I have been protecting people for 20 years in the NYPD Secret Service and FBI. I have worked with immigrants from every country and every background, most of them honest, law-abiding, and hardworking. They follow the rules, they are grateful for the opportunity, and they contribute. He gestured broadly, saying, and then there is you. You come here as a refugee, get every advantage, every opportunity, and you commit federal crimes multiple times. And you hide behind identity politics when anyone questions you. Omar tried to speak, saying, you do not understand what it is like. Do not understand. Bongino's voice went sharp. Do not understand what? Do not understand Hamid being an immigrant. My grandparents were immigrants, Italian, who came through Ellis Island. They worked their whole lives, followed every rule, never asked for handouts, and built a life. He pointed at himself, saying, I grew up in Queens, in a working-class neighborhood. My father was a city worker, and my mother a secretary, so nobody handed me anything. I worked for everything, became a cop on dangerous streets in East New York, Brooklyn, the 75th Precinct. You know what that neighborhood was like in the 90s, a war zone. His voice was passionate now and real, saying, I worked my way up from NYPD to Secret Service. I protected presidents, earned my way, and I followed every single rule, every background check, every security clearance, every protocol, because that is what you do in this country. You follow the rules. He turned back to Omar, saying, you did not follow the rules. You broke them repeatedly and deliberately, and you claim anyone who calls you out is attacking you because of your identity. He walked back to the table, sat down, and looked directly at her. This is not about you being Muslim. This is not about you being black. This is not about you being an immigrant. And this is not about you being a woman. He tapped the documents, saying, this is about federal crimes, about fraud, about lying, about corruption, and about betraying the system that saved your life. His voice went quieter and more intense, saying, you lecture Americans about compassion, about welcoming refugees, and about opening doors. And I actually agree with some of that. I think we should help people fleeing war, fleeing persecution, and fleeing violence. He leaned forward, saying, but we cannot help people if we cannot trust the system. And we cannot trust the system when people like you commit fraud, when you game it, and when you exploit it for personal benefit. He pulled out one final document, asking, you want to know what would clear all this up? What would prove your innocence, and what would shut down every accusation? He held it up, saying DNA test, simple, easy, quick. It proves Ahmed Elmi is not your brother and vindicates you completely. It makes me look like an idiot and makes everyone who accused you look like conspiracy theorists. He set it down, saying, "But you will not take it. Multiple outlets requested it, and you refused multiple times. Why?" He stared at her, saying, "Because you know what it would show. You know he is your brother. You know the test would prove you committed immigration fraud, and you cannot risk that." Omar was crying openly now with voice breaking, saying, "I do not have to prove anything to you. You do not have to prove anything to me." Bongino agreed. "But you should want to prove it to America, and you should want to clear your name. Unless you cannot, unless the accusations are true," he organized his papers. Refugee to Congresswoman could have been an inspiration, could have shown that the system works, that America welcomes those in need, and that opportunity exists. He looked at her with something like disappointment. "Instead, you proved that some people will exploit any system, will break any rule, will commit any fraud, and will call anyone who questions them a bigot." He pulled out his next section, saying, "But let us get back to specifics, because I want to try something. I want to ask you some very simple questions, and I want you to answer them yes or no. Can you do that, Congresswoman?" Bongino settled back in his chair in interrogation mode, as this was what he trained for. Decades of questioning suspects and decades of spotting lies. This was his element. In investigations, he began with a conversational voice. Innocent people answer questions. They are eager to clear their names, they cooperate, they provide evidence, and they want the truth to come out. He paused, stating guilty people. They deflect, they attack the questioner, they claim persecution, they refuse to answer, and they hide behind technicalities. He looked at Omar, saying, "Every single question I have asked you today, you have deflected. You have attacked me. You have claimed this is racist, Islamophobic, and a witch hunt. But you have not answered the questions." He pulled out a legal pad to a fresh page with pen ready. "So let us try this. Simple questions, yes or no answers. That is it. Just answer the questions." He clicked his pen, saying, "Question 1. Is Ahmed Noor Saeed Elmi your brother? Answer yes or no." Omar looked at her lawyers as they whispered. She turned back, saying, "These allegations are baseless conspiracy theories that have been addressed." "That is not a yes or no," Bongino interrupted, asking simply, "Is Ahmed Noor Saeed Elmi your brother?" Omar's jaw clenched as she stated, "I refuse to dignify that with a response." "Refusal to answer," Bongino said, writing it down. "Got it. Noted. Moving on." He looked up, saying, "Question 2. Did you file joint tax returns with Ahmed Hirsi in 2014 and 2015 while legally married to Ahmed Elmi?" Omar consulted with her lawyers again, saying, "I corrected those filings through the proper channels." "That is a yes," Bongino said, writing, "You did file joint returns with someone you were not married to while married to someone else." "Correct. The filings were amended. Yes or no? Did you file those returns as I described?" Silence followed. Omar looked trapped. Silence noted. Bongino said, "I will take that as a yes, since you did not deny it. Next question." He looked up, saying, "Question 3. In your 2017 divorce filing, did you state under penalty of perjury that you had no contact with Ahmed Elmi since June 2011? Omar's voice came out defensive, saying legal documents have specific wording. "Yes or no, did you make that statement in that filing?" "Yes, but—" "Yes, thank you for the first straight answer." Bongino wrote it down. Question 4. Were you photographed with Ahmed Elmi in London in 2015? Omar shook her head, saying those photos do not prove anything. Were you photographed with him in 2015 4 years after you claimed you had no contact. Her lawyers whispered urgently, and she did not answer. Refusal to answer, Bongino noted as interesting. He continued. Question 5. Did your campaign pay Tim Mynette's company approximately $370,000 between 2018 and 2019? Campaign expenditures are all properly disclosed, she said. That is a yes. $370,000 correct. The FEC filings show yes. Got it. He wrote it down, saying, Question 6. Were you having an affair with Tim Mynette during this time period? Omar's face went red, saying, My personal life. Beth Mynette testified under oath that you were in her divorce filing. Is her testimony false? I am not going to discuss my personal life. Refusal to answer, Bongino said. But we have testimony under oath from his ex-wife, so I will note that as confirmed by third-party witness. He looked up again, saying, Question 7. After you married Tim Mynette in 2020, did your campaign continue paying his company, and did those payments increase to over $1 million? Consulting fees are determined by market rates, she started. Yes or no, did payments increase after marriage? The services provided were valuable. Yes or no? Silence. I will check the FEC filings myself, Bongino said. They are public, and yes, they increased substantially. He set his pen down, looked at the legal pad, looked at the committee, and looked at Omar. 7 questions, 7 deflections, not one straight answer, and not one honest response. He stood up, saying, You know what I learned interrogating suspects for 20 years. This right here, he pointed at her. This is what guilt looks like. This is how criminals respond when cornered with evidence. He walked a few steps, saying, Innocent people say no, that is not true, and here is proof. They provide evidence, they welcome investigation, and they clear their name. He turned back, saying, You attack me, you claim racism, you refuse to answer, you hide behind your identity, you use your religion as a shield, and you claim victimhood. His voice went hard. But the evidence does not care about your feelings. Documents do not care about your identity, and facts do not care about political correctness. He pointed at his folder, saying, I have got UK government documents, US government documents, court filings, tax returns, FEC filings, sworn testimony, photos, emails, and witnesses. He spread his hands, asking, What do you have? Accusations of racism, claims of conspiracy theories, refusal to answer questions, and refusal to take a DNA test. He walked back to his seat, saying, In my 20 years in law enforcement, I have never seen an innocent person refuse a DNA test that would prove their innocence. Never, not once, innocent people take that test immediately. He sat down looking directly at her, saying, You will not take it because you cannot. Because it would prove you married your brother, and that would end your career, end your freedom, and possibly end your citizenship. Omar was sobbing now, with makeup ruined and voice barely working, claiming, This is harassment, and this is persecution. I do not have to sit here, and you do not have to sit here, Bongino agreed. You can leave, walk out, storm off, and claim victimhood because that is what guilty people do. He organized his papers, saying, But everyone watching this knows the truth. You committed federal crimes, multiple felonies, and you are hiding behind identity politics because you cannot defend yourself with facts. He pulled out his final section, saying, But let me address one more thing. Because people watching are probably wondering if you are so guilty, if the evidence is so strong, why have you not been charged? Why have you not been arrested? And why are you not in prison? He held up the papers, saying, Let me explain why you are probably going to get away with it. Bongino's tone changed again, becoming bitter and frustrated, as this was personal. You are sitting there wondering if I am so guilty, why am I not in handcuffs? Good question. Let me answer it, he said, pulling out a timeline. In 2016, conservative media starts investigating your marriages. Questions arise, and evidence accumulates. The U.S. Attorney for Minnesota, an Obama appointee named Andy Lugar, issues a letter saying they are not investigating. Convenient, he moved down the timeline. In 2017, Trump takes office. New administration, new prosecutors, so they should investigate, right? Should look at all this evidence. They do not. Why? Because you are a rising progressive star. You are a squad member. You check every diversity box, and prosecuting you would be political suicide. He tapped the timeline, saying in 2018, you are elected to Congress. Now you are protected by even more political considerations, and now you are a member of Congress. Going after you looks like political persecution, even though the evidence is overwhelming. He pulled out statutes, saying, but here is the real problem. Statute of limitations. Marriage fraud from 2009 means we are at 15 or 16 years now. And some statutes of limitations are 5 years, so it might be too late. Tax fraud from 2014 to 2015 is 6 years typically, so that could be expired. He read from legal documents stating the federal marriage fraud statute carries up to 5 years prison, but must be prosecuted within a certain time frame. Immigration fraud presents similar issues, but perjury from 2017 is more recent, so still potentially prosecutable. He set the papers down, saying, but here is the political reality. You are a minority woman, Muslim, immigrant, progressive Democrat, squad member. Going after you would be called racist, Islamophobic, sexist, and political persecution. His voice went hard with frustration, stating prosecutors are scared. They do not want the media backlash, and they do not want to be accused of targeting you because of your identity. So they do nothing. They let it slide, and they hope it goes away. He looked at the committee and at the cameras, saying, that is the system we have. Different rules for different people, if you are politically protected, if you check the right boxes, and if you have the right support. You can commit federal crimes and face no consequences. He pointed at her, saying, you should be in prison, or at minimum facing serious charges. Marriage fraud, immigration fraud, tax fraud, perjury, and campaign finance violations represent multiple felonies. He pulled out recent news articles, saying, but you know what? It might not be over. Tom Homan, the border czar for the Trump administration, is pulling your files, looking at what can still be prosecuted, with the FBI under new leadership. He smiled slightly, saying, my leadership, we are reviewing everything. He read from a recent statement by Tom Homan, quote, we are looking at the evidence. Some statute of limitations issues exist, but we are examining what legal options remain. That is not over, Congresswoman. That investigation is active. He pulled out more documents, saying, and there is another possibility people do not talk about. If you committed immigration fraud, if you married your brother to get him citizenship or benefits, that could affect your citizenship. He read from immigration law stating citizenship obtained through fraud or misrepresentation can be revoked, denaturalization. It is rare, but it happens. And if it is proven you committed immigration fraud even years ago or even decades ago, they can revoke your citizenship. He looked up, saying, and once citizenship is revoked, deportation becomes possible. Back to Somalia. Back to where you came from. That is the law. Omar's eyes went wide, fear visible now. Do not like that, Bongino asked. Do not want to face those consequences. Then you should have followed the rules, should have been grateful for the opportunity you were given instead of defrauding the system. He organized his papers one final time, saying, but realistically, you are probably going to get away with it. Political protection, media shield, identity politics armor, prosecutors too scared to act, and statute of limitations expired on some crimes. He looked directly at her, saying, but make no mistake. Everyone knows what you did. The evidence is public. It is documented. It is irrefutable. And history will record it. He stood up, saying, I spent 20 years in law enforcement, NYPD, Secret Service, FBI. I followed the rules and played by the book. I have seen criminals get away with crimes because they had the right connections, the right political protection, and the right identity. He pointed at her, saying, you are one of them. You committed federal crimes multiple times, and you are hiding behind identity politics, calling anyone who investigates you a racist, playing the victim while you are actually the criminal. His voice rose with passion, saying, but I will tell you something. The American people are not stupid. They see through it. They know what you did, and they know you married your brother. They know you committed tax fraud, and they know you lied under oath. They know you funneled campaign money to your affair partner, then husband. He gestured broadly. They know you came here as a refugee and repaid America by defrauding the immigration system. They know you are corrupt. They know you are a criminal. And one day, when you are gone from Congress, when your political career is over, all anyone will remember is that Ilhan Omar committed federal crimes and got away with it because the system was too broken to prosecute her. He sat back down calm now. The anger burned out. That is the truth. That is the reality. You win for now. You get away with it for now. But everyone knows, and history will judge you. He closed his folder, saying final, I am done, Madam Chairwoman. I have presented the evidence. The American people can judge for themselves. The hearing room erupted the moment Bongino finished, with media scrambling, staffers on phones, committee members arguing, and security trying to maintain order. Omar did not say another word. Her lawyers flanked her, and they rushed her out of the room through a side door away from cameras and away from reporters. But you cannot escape the internet. Within minutes, clips were everywhere. Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, every platform had Ilhan Omar exposed trending worldwide in under an hour. Hashtags like brother marriage, tax fraud, and campaign finance fraud were all trending and all viral. C-SPAN ratings shattered records, and the hearing footage replayed continuously on every news channel. Conservative media went 24/7 coverage, while mainstream media could not ignore it anymore. Even progressive outlets struggled to defend her, describing it as concerning, said one MSNBC host, clearly uncomfortable. These allegations deserve serious investigation. CNN tried harder to defend her. Bongino's attacks were aggressive and potentially inappropriate, but even they had to acknowledge the documents, the evidence, and the refusal to answer questions. Fox News ran victory laps, saying Bongino destroys Omar with facts. Squad member exposed for multiple felonies. The coverage was relentless, and by the next morning, Democrats were in full panic mode. Nancy Pelosi issued a careful statement saying, we take these allegations seriously and support thorough investigation through appropriate channels. Translation, we are distancing ourselves. Chuck Schumer said nothing. Absolutely nothing, as his office declined comment. Squad members tried to support her, with AOC tweeting, this is a coordinated attack on a woman of color in Congress, and we stand with Ilhan. But even that got ratioed, with thousands of comments asking, what about the evidence? Is evidence racist? Address the facts, not identity. Rashida Tlaib defended her. Ayanna Pressley defended her. But their voices were drowned out by the sheer volume of evidence now public. Documents were everywhere, with people sharing photos, timelines, and analyses. Within 3 days, a petition appeared, started by Ahmed Hassan, a refugee advocate in Minneapolis who came to America legally from Somalia. He waited years in the system, followed every rule, watched the hearing, saw the evidence, and he was furious. "I came here legally," he told reporters outside his community center. "I waited, I followed the rules. I was vetted with background checks and interviews, and years of waiting." And she commits fraud. She makes it harder for every legitimate refugee. His petition was titled, "Investigate Ilhan Omar for Immigration Fraud." The text was simple. "We, the undersigned, demand that the FBI, DOJ, and relevant authorities fully investigate Representative Ilhan Omar for immigration fraud, tax fraud, perjury, and campaign finance violations. The evidence presented in the congressional hearing demands action, and no one is above the law." First day, 50,000 signatures. Week 1, 200,000. Week 2, 500,000. Ahmed did interviews everywhere, including CNN, Fox, and MSNBC. His story was powerful, a legal refugee who followed the rules advocating for accountability. "She betrayed the system that saved her life," he said on Anderson Cooper. "She betrayed every honest refugee because now people will look at us with more suspicion because she proved the skeptics right." Cooper tried to push back, saying, "But the allegations are not proven. The evidence is overwhelming." Ahmed interrupted, citing the same father name, Instagram posts, email, 6 witnesses, photos contradicting her sworn statement, and refusal to take DNA test. That is not innocent behavior. Even Cooper had to acknowledge that. Sarah Mitchell came forward next, a friend of Beth Minette, who watched her friend's marriage destroyed. "Beth is a good person," Sarah told Fox News. "She did not deserve what happened." And to know campaign funds paid for the affair, donor money from working people, that is theft. She started her own petition to hold Ilhan Omar accountable for campaign finance violations. That got another 100,000 signatures quickly. Conservative Legal Foundation filed formal complaints to the FBI, to DOJ, to the House Ethics Committee, and to the Minnesota Attorney General demanding investigation and prosecution. The complaints were detailed and professional, citing specific laws, specific evidence, and specific violations hard to ignore. Tom Homan gave an interview saying, "We are reviewing everything on Fox News. Immigration fraud is serious. If she married her brother to game the system, that is a federal crime. Statute of limitations might be an issue on some charges, but we are examining what can still be prosecuted." Reporter asked, "Could she be deported?" Homan did not smile. "If citizenship was obtained through fraud, it can be revoked. That is the law. Denaturalization is possible. And after that, yes, deportation is possible, as we are looking at all options." That clip went mega viral with millions of views. The idea that Omar could be deported galvanized conservatives and enraged progressives. But the law was clear. Fraud invalidates citizenship. FBI under Bongino's leadership announced a review of the case, stating new evidence has come to light, and we are examining what was not investigated previously. This is not political. This is about federal crimes. Even Democrats who defended Omar went quiet, as there were too many felonies, too much evidence, and it was too politically toxic. Her fundraising collapsed. Donors pulled out. Major progressive PACs redirected money, and tech billionaires who had supported her stopped responding to calls. She had become poison, and primary challengers announced a moderate Democrat, a Republican, and even another progressive who promised integrity and accountability. "I support progressive policies," the progressive challenger said, "but we need representatives who follow the law, who do not commit federal crimes, and who do not embarrass our movement." Polls showed her favorability dropping in her own district among her own constituents. 6 months later, Omar held a press conference looking exhausted, with perfect makeup but a drawn face, having aged visibly. "After much consideration and consultation with my family," she read from a prepared statement, "I have decided not to seek re-election. I want to spend more time with my family and explore new opportunities outside of Congress." This translated to mean she was done, politically finished, her career over. The media attempted to spin it as her personal choice to step down to focus on family, but everyone knew the actual truth. She had been destroyed, exposed, and forced out. Ahmed Hassan issued a statement saying, "Good, but it is not enough. She should face charges. She should be investigated. She should be held accountable, because justice requires it." Sarah Mitchell agreed, saying she is escaping responsibility, walking away, getting to keep her freedom, while the evidence of her crimes is public. That is not justice. That is the system failing. Conservative media declared victory, stating Bongino destroyed Omar's career, squad member forced out after fraud exposure. The coverage was triumphant, but Tom Homan was not done. "Investigation continues," he said in a statement. "Just because she is leaving Congress does not mean the law does not apply. We are still examining potential charges, so that investigation continues today. Files are being reviewed, evidence is being analyzed, and prosecutors are considering options. Will she be charged? That is unknown due to political considerations and statute of limitations challenges in proving some allegations beyond reasonable doubt. But everyone knows what she did, everyone knows she married her brother, and everyone knows she committed tax fraud. Everyone knows she lied under oath. Everyone knows she funneled campaign money to her affair partner. And everyone knows she came here as a refugee and repaid America by defrauding the immigration system. The evidence is public. The documents are real. The witnesses testified. The facts are facts. And history will record it all. Ilhan Omar came to America as a refugee, rose to Congress, and fell because she committed federal crimes and thought she could hide behind identity politics. She was wrong, and Dan Bongino, a street cop from Queens who protected presidents, made it to FBI deputy director and used his platform to expose corruption with evidence and facts. That is the story. That is what happened when Ilhan Omar tried to destroy Dan Bongino, as she destroyed herself instead. Stories like this matter because politicians like Ilhan Omar count on you not knowing the facts. They count on identity politics protecting them, and they count on calling investigators racist instead of answering questions. They count on the media ignoring evidence, and they count on prosecutors being too scared to act. But the evidence is out there, the documents are real, and the facts do not lie. If this opened your eyes to who Ilhan Omar really is, share this story. Let people know the truth, and let them see the evidence. Let them understand what she did. Drop a comment. Should she be prosecuted? Should she be deported? What do you think justice looks like here? Subscribe for more truth, more facts, and more accountability. Because politicians like Omar need to be exposed. The corrupt need to be called out. The criminals need to face consequences. This is just one story, but there are plenty more politicians committing crimes, plenty more corruption to expose, and plenty more truth to tell. See you in the next one.